Hello and welcome to another episode of the Happy Movie Mangoes podcast, where we talk about all things movies and TV. Today, we're talking about our top five favorite movie directors of all time.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Cool. All right. I think what we should do is I'll read Dallin's notes, then I'll skip mine, and then you'll give yours. Does that sound good?
Yes, for those of you listening, Dallin can't make it to this week's episode. So, like Matt said, we'll read his notes in.
All right. So starting with number five, his fifth favorite director ever is Jon Favreau. That's
Oh, okay.
pretty interesting.
I only know who that is because I did a bunch of research before this episode on movie directors.
Yeah. So he did Iron Man, Elf. He directed the Mandalorian show for like the first little bit. I think he also directed the remake of The Lion King, which was like super successful.
The live action one, right?
Uh-huh. Yep. Yep.
I have
Live action CGI one.
I have not seen it, but I've not heard good things about that movie.
I haven't seen either. I can't imagine it being anywhere close to the original, but it did do well. Like out of all the Disney remakes, that one did pretty good. So
Oh, I did not know that.
yeah. So Down likes him for his movies because they have like the right balance for like serious and comedy, really compelling stories and things that are very true to the comic book characters. He makes great content when he wants to and when he has free reign. So if he's like confined, he feels like that's where he does poorly. So
Oh,
like for like
gotcha.
a studio, like Disney, for example, if they're like restricting him, then he feels like he doesn't do as well.
Yeah.
So
Isn't he also wasn't he in Deadpool?
yeah, spoilers. Well, I guess that's
Oh
not really.
yeah. I mean, you can look up the movie cast, can't you?
Yes, but yeah, so he was in that. He was in the original Daredevil movie, so he's like shown up in quite a few places.
So not only is he a director, but he's also an actor.
Yeah, so I think he's like known for being part of like just filmmaking in general. So
Yeah.
he's definitely had some big hits and some big misses. So my fifth favorite director of all time, and this is the part where you roll your eyes, is Quentin Tarantino.
Oh man.
Yeah.
He has some good movies.
Yeah, I was like thinking about it, looking through all the directors and like because this like the fifth spot was like the one where I was having a tough time, but this one's good, but this one's good. I was like, gotta give it to Quentin Tarantino. So he did one of my all some of my favorite movies of his are like Pulp Fiction, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Inglourious Bastards,
Kill Bill.
Django Unchained. Nobody likes Kill Bill, and so Uma
Strong
Thurman
disagree.
doesn't even like it.
He doesn't?
No, Uma Thurman likes it. She's the Kill Bill actress. She likes it. So
Yeah, I know. That's why I was shocked when you said that.
yeah. And Hateful Eight's pretty good, so I would watch that. So not only is like he just an excellent writer, so he's written for all those movies, but he's like not afraid to try like very different like movie techniques. And so that's where it's like he's kind of been accused or not accused. His style is like spaghetti western movies, kind of like The Good, the Bad, the Ugly.
Mhm.
But you see, like he just takes that up a notch and it's basically on steroids when he's doing a bunch of his movie techniques with all his characters and every scene. And so it's really, but it's also just not like meaningless. Like he's just doing something for like shock value. He's like researched it. He loves it. There's meaning behind it, you know?
Yeah.
So he's very intentional with his movies. And I would say like definitely if you want to see like where he's got inspired, just watch like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and then Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then you'll see like how that plays into all his movies that he's made.
Yeah.
So those are like some of his strengths of what he does. Some of his weaknesses, I feel like, are he sometimes makes like movie scenes or characters that are just not that interesting and don't really have any purpose for like the plot or moving things forward or like the characters themselves. Just, when they're fleshed out, it's like, oh, it's kind of boring. Reservoir Dogs, like, I think like half of the movie is like a five-star movie and the other half is just not that good where it just like does that all the time where these characters are interacting and do a bunch of interesting things and for Kill Bill like the entire movie is just about this uninteresting character nobody wants to follow or watch, so I just don't know what he was thinking.
Well, I think Quentin Tarantino is a weird dude. I've heard some weird things about him. And
Yeah.
out of all of the directors that I like did research about, I would guess that he's the weirdest. And maybe that like plays into why his movies are the way they are. But yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely like it's like you said, weird, so it's like different, but he's like smart, so it's like interesting, and he's not like he's definitely like very opinionated. Like he says some like stuff about just movies in general that I like strongly disagree with, but you kind of need that person to be in charge and to make like have a direction and not just be a corporate tool. So
Yeah.
cool. So what's your fifth favorite director of all time, Spencer?
All right, before we get into my list, I just want to say that I had a really hard time coming up with this list. I don't really care about directors.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't watch a movie just because of a specific director, except for one, which I will get into. But how I picked my list was kind of based on the movies that they did. And I kind of did it in a way where I recognized the majority or a lot of their dis movies that they've done.
Mm-hmm.
So keep that in mind as well. And oh, there's one more thing I was going to say. Shoot, I can't remember. Anyways, so my fifth one is Gary Ross.
Who is Gary Ross?
So the reason I liked him, he's only directed 6 movies, but half of them, 3 of them, I think are 5-star movies. It's the first Hunger Games.
Oh,
It's
the second Hunger Games.
no, it's another dude did the other Hunger
Oh,
Games.
okay. I had no idea.
Um, Pleasantville, which I don't know if you've seen that one. That's a black and white movie.
I
But
don't
I
even heard of it.
enjoyed that one. And then the third one is Ocean's 8, which I really enjoyed that movie as well.
Like the one with George Clooney and Brad Pitt and everyone else. Is that
I believe so, yeah.
okay?
Yeah, so that's 3 of the movies he directed. I didn't recognize the other 3 that he did. They were
Mhm.
probably earlier in his career, but
Yeah.
I feel like a 50% rate is pretty good when it comes to directing.
Yeah.
Um, so, oh, I remember the thing that I was gonna mention. So when I was doing all this research about directors, something that I noticed is once a director had like a super big hit movie, they just like stop making movies unless it's like a really famous director that has like 60 or more movies that they've directed. Like there was quite a few that only directed like 5 to 10 movies and then they were just like done. And I was like, wow.
Yeah. The pattern I seem to notice is they either like make a big movie and then they try to chase that high for the rest of their life, or they're like they make a couple small movies and then they're giving them their big shot and they like fail it and then they never make a movie again. So, but he's
I
kind of
just
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, I just assumed like the big hit movies made them a lot of money. So then they're like, well, I can retire now.
Oh yeah, that's probably true.
I don't know if that's true, but that was my thought process is like the directors who directed a ton of movies are good and they enjoy it.
Hmm.
Whereas like the ones that just had like 1 or 2 big hit movies just did it for the money. At least that's what it seems like. I don't know. That's probably not true for all directors, but
It's definitely true with Taika Waititi. The He's
mm.
like the Thor Ragnarok director, so he only did that movie. Like he hates Thor, doesn't like superheroes. He only did that movie because he needed the money, and
Yeah.
so that's why he did a good job with that one. But yeah, I think that's probably true. I was actually going to talk about some other directors on here as well about like, or at least one of them of why they stopped with what they're doing. But I'll get into that later.
Yeah, let's go into
So
number fours.
Down's number four favorite director of all time is George Lucas.
Oh,
So yeah, so he did like he's been a producer and writer for a lot of movies. He directed the first Star Wars movie and then the prequels. So episode 5 and 6 were different directors. So he also made American Graffiti. So that's kind of like what made George Lucas famous. So
I have not seen American Graffiti.
I haven't either, but I've heard good things. But,
Okay.
yeah. It was before the greatest franchise that came out, like, so,
Yeah.
so yeah. What it feels like George Lucas can do well is like make really good stories and use like CGI and like or like special effects that they had at the time and use them really well. Even though he can make like good story building and world building, his personal like life or love hate relationship with the fans gets the way of the writing. And so that's kind of like where it's like, as a director, he'll focus on certain things in the story that a lot of people don't agree with. So it's kind of like back and forth.
Yeah,
Yeah. So that's down to number four.
cool.
Let's see what my number four. Oh, Chris Columbus. So this is the person I was talking about. So he directed.
Oh, the
Oh,
Harry
go ahead.
Potters
Yeah, the
or the
first
the
two.
first two. Yeah.
Mhm. He also did Home Alone 1 and 2 as well.
Yes.
So I think what he does really well is he sets up like a world, like the pacing of the story in the mind of a child. So he's really good at like capturing the magic that way and setting up his movies. So it's like Home Alone and Harry Potter are both like perfect movies for children. And although like adults do enjoy them, it's like that's kind of like the tone and setting. Each of those movies kind of has like this Christmas setting at some point, and like really focusing on like parents and family, and so it's just really like feels nice and it's well done. I think his weakness as a director is making movies that are like based around adults or teenagers. So like Pixels
Hmm.
was him.
I haven't seen that.
So that was like a comedy movie with Adam Sandler where like a bunch of video games
Uh,
come to life, where aliens make video games turn into reality and they have to use their video game skills to beat them. So it's just kind of like stupid. He did. Have you heard like the Percy Jackson movie?
oh yes, yes. I was super upset about that
Mm-hmm.
because I had read the series and it did not follow the books like at all.
Yeah.
Like the color of hair of the main girl was completely different than in the books. And I was like, what the heck? Can't even
Yeah.
cast right.
And I wonder if like part of his yeah, so it's like what's crazy. So the reason why he only did the first two Harry Potter movies and didn't continue was because he just wanted to focus on his family. And so
Oh,
yeah, so I think like if you look at his later movies, like past like Home Alone and Harry Potter 2, they're just not as good. And I just because I think like his heart and his effort's not really into him. Um,
yeah.
and honestly, when I think another thing is, and I'm gonna say this about another director, is like when they start having families, their thoughts and what makes them good kind of just goes out the window. So,
That's probably true.
yeah, this is dang stupid families. All right, so what's your number four?
Wait, before we get to mine. So
Oh,
I almost put Chris Columbus as one of my top five.
oh, okay.
Um, because I recognize the first two Harry Potter movies and Home Alones and the Percy Jackson movie, although I didn't like him for the Percy Jackson movie.
Yeah,
So I recognize quite a few of the movies that he's done, and I think he set up the Harry Potter series super well. I did not know that he didn't continue because of his family, and I wonder how the series would have been different if he had continued. Because after his movies, the Harry Potter series got really dark. Like I
yeah,
feel like the first two movies are like, at least color wise, they're a lot warmer, and not quite so dark. So I think that's really interesting to think about.
yeah. Well, the next two movies are like different directors, and then like from five until eight, it's like one director who did that. So those movies are like they're pretty much all uniform to their style and
Hmm.
their what they're focused on. But yeah, I think I really like his style a lot better than the other directors. So I think, in my opinion, it would have been better.
Oh, interesting.
But that said, my point was is that he can only do like children's movies, and they're kind of turning into like teenagers and going through like puberty
Yeah.
and stuff. I don't know if he could. Maybe it's possible he might not have been able to nail it. So
Yeah. Yeah. My other question that I don't know is his first name Christopher? Because if it is, that'd be really funny.
I bet it is, and I bet he shortened it down to Chris, so people would stop saying, "Oh, like Christopher Columbus." And I was like, "Yes, that's what my parents did. Leave me alone."
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Uh,
Okay, moving on to my number four. My number four is Peter Jackson.
yes,
So he did the Lord of the Rings, and did he do The Hobbit? I can't remember.
he did do the Hobbit. That e bag.
So I picked him as my number four because I recognized most of his movies, and they're some of the most well-known movies. Like
Hmm.
Lord of the Rings is like some of the best movies, and people put them on their top five lists. Like we even talked about Lord of the Rings in our top five movies list episode.
Hmm.
So I feel like he really nailed that series. And if I remember right, looking at the movies he did, he pretty much just does like Lord of the Rings stuff. Like The Hobbit is involved with Lord of the Rings, and then he did Lord of the Rings. There might be a few other movies that he did that aren't related, but I feel like the majority of his movies, which he's really good at, is that series and genre.
Yeah, because those were like that was like a legit like passion project, like by someone like we'll probably never see something like Lord of the Rings ever again because of him, you know. Like
Hmm.
he was just devoted to making not for like money or anything else. He was just devoted to making the series for like Tolkien and the fans. My guess is like if he's in other stuff or directing other stuff, it was like one, The Hobbit, which they're like, come on, you just do it just for marketing reasons. And he's like, all right. And then like other movies, like, oh my gosh, this is the Lord of the Rings director. We gotta beg him to direct this movie.
Yeah. The other reason I picked him as my number four is his name is Peter Jackson, which that's one of my favorite book series of
Oh
all
my
time. So
gosh.
great name,
All right.
great director.
Okay. All right. So Dallon's number three. So his third favorite movie director of all time is Christopher Nolan. So
Okay.
Dark Knight, Interstellar, Inception. He did Oppenheimer, blah blah blah, Tenet. So what he thinks he does very well is he's very like dark and serious with his movies, but it's like but also makes them very suspenseful and thrilling. And also like Christopher Nolan is just a good writer as well. So
Oh, so he
it
writes and directs.
yeah, I think he like partially writes some of his movies and like I think he wrote The Dark Knight with his brother. And so
Mm.
but he usually writes and I think that helps him do the vision of what he wants and makes it very strong and he can change things. So that's really good. Dallin thinks so he can present the plot in a thriller in a type of way that makes the movies make you want to rewatch it and try to understand everything. However, he does questionable choices and sometimes can't make the plot points make sense, like Tenet and the ending of Inception. So,
Yeah.
so that's Down's number three. My number three is Peter Jackson. So,
Oh.
yeah, but not just because of his name.
It wasn't just because of his name. It was also because of his name.
Yeah, yeah. All right. I think he was like, and like I was saying with when you were talking about him, like he only did Lord of the Rings because he really wanted to. And the studio, like New Line Cinema, they just wanted like a one movie where they tell the whole story and just, you know, make money. And he's like, no, it's like if we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this right, and we're gonna have to do three movies. And they almost fired him because of that. But he's really good at like finding, casting like the best person for each role, for each scene. It's like it's beautiful. He does like an excellent use of CGI. So that's kind of like where I'm saying like he didn't really spare any expenses, or it's like with most movies they always do. And so
Yeah.
he did the best job he could with like what he had at hand, and that's why it's like we're not going to see that ever again. And so, but he also made some definitely like a lot of like artistic, creative choices, like some stuff that wasn't in the book he put in the movie, or there's like a lot he didn't like obviously put everything in the books into the movie, so he had to like shorten things down or only do things that were going to like help it. And even with like the theatrical version, like I think the extended edition is fun, but I don't like really like it. Whereas like the theatrical version is just like beautifully well done and like the pacing is
Mhm.
perfect and the storytelling's perfect.
Oh, that's interesting. You don't like the director's cut. I feel like a lot of, or the extended ones, because I feel like a lot of people who love Lord of the Rings love the extended ones more than the theatrical.
Yeah, I think it's like because like they love Lord of the Rings and they just want more, and I think that's what it is. But it's like
Yeah.
you can't have the scene where like Frodo's like almost dying, and then Sam like does like this weird like looking over shot where he's like, "Look, Mr. Frodo, it's Bilbo Strauss," and then go back to
Yeah.
it's like I'm glad they decided to like take that out, or it's like the movie's kind of like having its resolution at the end of Two Towers, and it's like we can't do a joke scene where it's like Gimli and Legolas like are having, even though it's funny, it's like it kind of like deters like the climax feeling that you get.
Yeah.
Oh, and I was gonna say Peter Jackson, his weakness is when he doesn't like it's when it's not Lord of the Rings because he's not like passionate about that stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, that's like the thing with a lot of these directors is like they're making these movies, and when it's good, it's because they're like pouring their heart and soul and their sweat and tears and their blood into this movie. And if it's not a movie they care about, they're not going to do that.
Right. Yeah.
So what's your number three?
You're probably gonna hate me for this,
Ready?
but my number three is James Cameron.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, boo, but yeah, I get it.
So he did Avatar, the Blue People Avatar,
Mhm,
and Titanic and
mhm,
Terminator.
mhm.
And the reason I picked him as my number three is I'm guessing, I don't know for sure. I mean, I haven't crunched the numbers, but I'm guessing his movies have been the most watched movies. Well, actually, maybe not.
Titanic
Probably
definitely had a
not.
bunch of girls rewatching and rewatching and rewatching, you know?
I'll just say that his movies
So
have been seen a frick ton.
yeah, like pretty much everyone saw Avatar.
Yeah, and I feel like most people have seen Titanic, and a lot of people have seen the Terminator. I mean, I haven't seen the original one, but that's a well-known movie. So, yeah, that I think is the main reason why I picked James Cameron is just because of the viewership. So that means he must have done some things right.
Yeah. My critique of him is he tells like the most like basic stories with like the best use of like CGI and visuals. Like Avatar 2 was like stunning and it was just like I was like blown away how colorful and like how well done the CGI is. And I think that's like what he does well. But it's like the stories are I think in my opinion are just like meh.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
maybe that could be like a writing thing and not really directing.
That's true. I don't know. I honestly don't know that much about him. I just picked him because his movies have been seen a lot.
Yeah, they're definitely. I think he's like financially the best director. Like if you want, but at the same time, he's also very opinionated. He's also like won't do something unless he wants to. So you can't just like hire him on for a film that he doesn't care about. You know?
Yeah. I'm curious to see how the sequel avatars go compared to
All
the
10 of
first
them,
two. Because like in his like when you look at his movies, you can see like all the others. I think there's gonna be five.
a million
Um
probably.
so I feel like they're just gonna get worse and worse. So he might be a worse and worse director later on. But as of right now, like his movies are pretty good, I think.
Well, I think didn't like the second one like yeah, it was like the highest grossing film of that year. So
Yeah,
Titanic highest grossing film, Terminator 2 highest grossing film of that year. He's yeah, he just doesn't.
he's just
He
a
knows what
money
he's doing.
maker.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe I don't know if the directors have any say in the marketing, but maybe he's really good at marketing the movies. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I think he probably is, but not in like the way of like probably just the way the movie is and like how you promote the movie. Like yeah, probably he probably is a marketing genius, just not in like the traditional ways. So I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah. All right, on to number twos.
Oh, so Down's number two is actually Quentin Tarantino. So there you
Oh
go.
wow.
Yeah. So he liked Pulp Fiction. I think he liked Kill Bill. He might not. I don't know. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So Down was saying he does a great job of telling weird and wacky stories. So kind of like you were saying, he's a weird and wacky guy, but he
Yeah.
makes them interesting and enjoyable, even though they're unconventional. He makes great badass characters that can present plot twists well. Sometimes chooses weird things like stylistic or like, things that are just like kind of unrealistic, like blood in Django Unchained, where like when people get shot, they're like bursting open and like it's like explosion of them.
Yeah, that's kind of
Uh,
like Kill Bill too.
yeah. Oh yeah, where like they cut off someone's head and there's just like this geyser of blood.
That's one of the reasons why I like Kill Bill is because of the comedic blood.
Okay. So my number two favorite director of all time is George Lucas. So
Oh,
yeah.
wow. A lot of repeats in our lists.
Yeah, you can tell that me and Dallin are brothers. So so George Lucas, I think he's a genius and just unintentionally funny. And so like I love him as like a director, producer, and writer some of the time, but I always love him as a director. Because so like the first movie, he had like his wife, his like directing buddies, the actors giving him a lot of good pointers of how to make Star Wars work. And obviously had John Williams with a great score and like all these great things about the movie. But like with the prequels, it's pretty much his own control of what he wants and his own vision. And it's just like, it angered a lot of people when it first came out in theaters. And I loved it as a kid because I couldn't understand the dialogue. But like as an adult, it's funny watching it every time because I'm like thinking just like, why did they just, like why are there so many inconsistencies and like why are there like these characters like make zero sense or they're super dumb or like and it's like but it's in a way that's like super funny that it's like a guilty pleasure experience where you're like, oh, this is bad, but it's like I can't not stop watching it.
Yeah, yeah.
I even like really like the Phantom Menace, and it's like for the reasons that people hate the Phantom Menace. Like Jar Jar is like annoying, but it's like yeah, it's like really funny. Like George Lucas went with this character, like this, and then in the
Yeah,
next two movies, Jar Jar has very little to say.
yeah, yeah. I feel like George Lucas is to Star Wars as Peter Jackson is to Lord of the Rings,
Hmm.
where like he's really good at Star Wars, but anything else. Like, did he do any other movies besides Star Wars stuff?
So as far as like producing, he's done a ton of stuff and writing. He wrote the Indiana Jones movies for those. So, but
Oh,
like directing is really like Star Wars, like the first one, the prequels, American Graffiti, like X213 or whatever that movie's called, and then maybe a few other stuff.
yeah. Yeah, so like his gold spot is Star Wars when it
Oh
comes to
yeah.
directing.
Yeah, I think like when he was directing the prequels, like people just thought he was like this genius that couldn't do any wrong. And so like the people that were around him didn't really like challenge him. Whereas like when
Mhm.
he was first starting with Star Wars, like pretty much everyone challenged him. So and like he listened when they had like good points. So
Yeah.
I think he really in order for him to work, he needs that. But if it's just his own control, it's like it's gonna be funny, but it's gonna be bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, all right. What's your number two favorite director of all time?
My number two is Steven Spielberg.
Ooh.
So he is probably one of the most well-known directors of all time.
Hmm.
He's one of the ones that has directed a ton of movies, like 70 plus, and I
Hmm.
feel like a lot of them are classics, like Jurassic Park, Indiana Jones.
Hmm.
I can't think of any others off the top of my head.
Saving Private Ryan, Schindler's List,
Oh yeah,
E.T.
yeah. All of those good ones, like all classics. I feel like he's super well known. And we talked about earlier how there's like directors who are really good at when they're passionate. I think he's just really good all around at
Hmm.
directing. Like, and I think that's why he's done so many. I'm sure he puts passion into them, but I feel like it'd be hard to put 100% passion into every single movie, especially if you've done 70 plus movies. But because so many of them are still good, that just shows the quality of directing that he did. So, or does. Is he still making movies?
I know. Didn't he direct Ready Player One? I think,
Oh,
but
did
that might have
he?
been
Oh,
years ago. I don't know.
yeah. Yeah.
I'm not sure if he's making more movies or not. So actually, me and Down's number one favorite director of all time is Steven Spielberg.
Oh, snap.
So this perfectly segues to this. I think he's great up until like when he gets into like to the 2000s, then I think it starts to like go downhill. And this is the type of person where I'm saying like I think once he has like a family, he stops like or actually maybe we can go back even further. So when he like directed the first Indiana Jones movie, it was great. And then did you watch the second one? The Temple of Doom?
I can't remember.
Well, it like people didn't like it, and it's because he was like going through a divorce, and so he's basically just showing up to set and just doesn't care. And so like the same time, like George Lucas got divorced, and so he's making like this super violent, super racist, super
Oh yeah.
sexist movie. That's like just also like very inconsistent and all these dumb things. But with Steven Spielberg, I think like Indiana Jones was like his Jewish revenge movie against the Nazis. And so when you have like a movie that's like they're fighting the voodoo Hindus or whatever,
Hmm.
he just like doesn't care. And then when it's back to Nazis, it's really good. And then when it's like versus the Russians, like in the fourth Indiana Jones movie, he's like, or it's like aliens. He's like, I don't care about any of this, you know. So it's like I'm not gonna try.
Yeah.
I recently watched Saving Private Ryan, and that was awesome. Like that is like I think it holds up. And that was like made in like 90 something, so 99.
Yeah. Yeah, that one's on my watch list. I have not seen that one, but I've heard so many good things about that movie.
Yeah, I watched it this year. It still holds up. So I think what he does well is like with his movies is tone. And so whatever you're supposed to be feeling, you feel, right? So it's like if it's scary, you're feeling scared. If it's like funny, it's like it's hilarious. If it's got cool action, you're feeling like epic and awesome, like with Indiana Jones or
Hmm.
Jurassic Park does like all those emotions really well.
Yeah.
And like the lighting with every scene, like the use of animatronics that he does in filming, he's just like a genius. So I think that's what he does well. So I think he's one where it's like he does well when he tries and when he doesn't like and then like you know once he's got like a family, he starts being like, oh, you know, just make it lighthearted and fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
I need to watch Schindler's List, so that's my probably like Steven Spielberg movie I need to see is Schindler's List. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many of them. Like you could spend an entire year like watching his movies.
Yeah. So Dallin was saying that he like has really good, fantastic, and iconic characters, which is really true, and
Hmm.
great world building, and pretty much everything's translated well on screen. Like cinematically, it's everything makes sense. Yeah, and other times it's like it can be forgettable. So that's like something I think it's true. Is sometimes he does things that's a little goofy. So all right, so what's your number one favorite director of all time?
So my number one director of all time is Christopher Nolan. So he was on your guys' list.
Yep.
So the reason I picked him over Steven Spielberg is because all of the movies that I've seen of his I've enjoyed and I feel like they're really, really iconic. I mean, you could argue the same for Steven Spielberg for me, but for me personally, I think I recognize Christopher Nolan movies better than Steven Spielberg movies. Like Christopher Nolan has a very specific like tone and style to his movies, whereas like Steven
Mhm.
Spielberg is good at different types of movies, I would say. Whereas Christopher Nolan is like one one type. So yeah, that's why I picked
Well,
Christopher
that's
Nolan.
just your opinion.
Well, it's just your opinion, man.
Yeah. No, okay, I get that. He's definitely like I think he definitely would be up there now. Like after Oppenheimer, he's definitely more recognized. So
Yeah. Cool. Well, that's going to be it for this episode. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will catch you in the next Happy Movie Mangoes podcast episode.
hmm.
Hmm.